So are there any other Triumph remotes that you want to talk about? And if you can use any of your favorites to sort of deconstruct the process.
I'm trying to think. Probably the second most beloved Triumph remote was when I went to, Conan was in Chicago, right. And there's this legendary hot dog stand that I lived 2 blocks away when I worked in Chicago in the 80s, when it was just flipping from a regular hot dog stand into a stand where the clerks abuse the customers, called the Wiener's Circle. And
the abuse is part of the appeal.
Absolutely. And it's like black people behind the counter in a very like yuppie neighborhood of Chicago, basically south of Wrigleyville, Lincoln Park. So, I used to call it organized racism. Like, it's kind of...
It's more like organized reparations in a way.
It goes both ways, yes. It's just like an outlet, calling these preppy assholes, out. And, nobody would use racial terms on the ladies behind the counter, but, they were going at it. And like PBS tried to turn it into like a really ugly thing, but it was actually, I don't know, to me it was kind of a healthy outlet. Everybody was kidding in a way. And the women behind the counter are incredibly witty, really, really funny people. And especially this one lady named Poochie, who's the kind of the ringleader. So I'd always kind of fantasized about Triumph doing a remote there. And
it's sort of prophetic then that the woman's name is Poochie.
Yeah, that was just a coincidence. Magnificent kismet. But Conan actually went to Chicago in 2012, and I had this idea that, Conan, what if you go in there first and they really abuse you, and then Triumph will be your avenging angel, and it'll be a whole new way of using Triumph where he's like shitting on people who've bullied someone else. And Conan just didn't want to do it, or he had something else that night. So then I suggested Jack McBrayer, because he's, his persona is like the sweetest human being in the country. So, and of course Jack was more than willing to do it. He's a big friend of the Conan show. So that was a very hectic night. We went at like 8 o'clock on a Friday night, and it really doesn't get crazy until midnight, 1 o'clock at that place. That's when people are they've done their partying and they're drunk, and now they want to have
hot dogs after they've gotten drunk at the bars.
Exactly. And now it's time for some hot dogs and some abuse. And it really is like, Epcot for, insults. Just, and it just, we had a couple of handhelds in there and just did our thing. And then at the very end, I thought it would be really funny if Triumph vomited on everybody. So we did that too. And one guy
And did you warn people in advance?
Oh, I asked people, are you guys willing to, is anybody here willing to be vomited on? Normally you wouldn't get a lot of takers, but at 2 a.m. at the Wiener's Circle, surprising amount of people, you get a handful of people who are like, sure, I'll be puked on. And so the whole joke was like they were toasting the Wiener Circle like as a gesture of friendship at the end of the remote. But the second Triumph bites into the hot dog, he throws up.
But my favorite part of that piece is Triumph going head to head.
Oh yeah, with Poochie. Yeah.
And how much of that was written?
No. We had a lot of jokes we wrote in advance. A lot of jokes that and I'm just throwing them out in different places, and even the big rant, like I kind of had written most of that out in my head in advance. The thing with America for rah-rah, and Stephen A. Smith, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I'm just yelling nonsense while she's yelling back at me.
All those non sequiturs were just amazing.
Yeah. 800. It was the Empire, whatever right. The Empire. 588-2300 Empire, bitch. That was one of my favorite Triumph moments ever. That and there's one. I love when Triumph can go on a long rant. There was one other time that's one of my favorite things ever that nobody really remembers, when I was on a tour bus in Los Angeles, and I said, let's go over here. I know Ted Danson. I'll get into Ted Danson's house. I know Ted Danson. And we go to the door, and there are these attack dogs. And it's just a shot of Triumph on one side of the wall and two really fierce Rottweilers, I think. And they're just barking relentlessly in Triumph. And it's face to face, and Triumph's like, I know Danson, fuck you, so help me God, you son of a bitches are going to be sorry because I know fucking Ted. And it's one of my favorite things I've ever done, because the dogs have no idea how funny they're being. I just loved, in the early years of Triumph and the TV Funhouse Comedy Central show, I just loved that I was using animals who were not doing any trained material at all. They were just showing up and doing what was organically appropriate for them, whether it's barking or eating food. And they have no idea how funny they're being. Just none.
Now, we can't talk about Triumph without talking about the incident of the VMAs.
Oh, Eminem.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'd gone there the year before. I was invited to the MTV Awards to make fun of Carson Daly. And then spontaneously I walked over to J-Lo, who was in the row in front of me. And I asked her during the commercial break, I noticed she was there. Is it okay if I say something? And, is it going to be about my butt? Well, what else am I going to do? I literally was that. And she was like, all right. And I guess she agreed to it because I just looked so pathetic, because I'm on my knees, literally. I'm like this, and I'm like balding, and I got a puppet, and I'm in my 40s, and it's not a pretty picture, you know. It evokes sympathy, oddly enough, contrary to
You're really letting us
it,
inside here.
It emits venom, but evokes sympathy. And she was not happy after, you know, he said, may I sniff your butt? And they actually removed it from the episode, from the reruns, because her manager, some guy named Sandy, there's always a Sandy when there's trouble, and he had it removed. But they invited me back the next year anyway. Like, the show loved it. So they invite me back. We agree that I'm going to make fun of Moby this year. But now they're ready. Like, so you're going to go up and make fun of someone else, right? Well, look at this section here. There's going to be, Diddy's going to be here, and blah, 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 and here's Eminem. What about Eminem? I was like, yeah, I could do an Eminem. Will you tell him in advance? He's Eminem. He's going to love it. You've seen his videos. They're hilarious. It's Eminem. Okay. And then, so during a commercial break, they seat me and Moby like 4 rows behind Eminem. And Moby had made fun of Eminem. He hadn't made fun of Eminem. He criticized Eminem like earlier in the year, or maybe a year earlier. He had called him homophobic, his lyrics. And Eminem then made fun of Moby in a video that ended up being video of the year that year. Moby thought it would be okay to be a part of this. And so we're seated there, and it's a commercial break, like I said, and we're next. And Eminem is like 4 rows in front of Moby and spots him. Like, just notices the hubbub and sees that it's Moby. Mm-hmm. The fuck are you doing here, asshole?
To Moby,
yeah,
not
to
you.
Moby. No,
Okay.
to Moby.
Okay.
And Moby's like, oh, hi, how you doing? And Eminem's like, yeah, that's right. You're a fucking asshole. Go fuck yourself. And then just goes back to his, still has no idea what's going to come.
Right.
He's just angry that Moby's anywhere near him. And in his head, he's thinking, are they fucking with me? And then we start doing the bit. I make fun of Moby. I mention Eminem as I'm making fun of Moby. And then I get up, as I was told, and go to start to make fun of Eminem. And one thing I did that I'm very grateful for was I had warned the cameraman, the handheld cameraman in rehearsal. I said, look, just in case there's any kind of problem, just whatever you do, could you do me a favor and never shoot me? Just stay on the dog. Don't give MTV a shot of me with the dog. Because in my mind, I was just too precious and paranoid about, oh, that's going to be the end of Triumph if they see.
It'll shatter the illusion?
It'll ruin. I always say Triumph's voice is, don't ruin it for the kids. They think I'm real. Please don't ruin. But for to the guy's credit, he, so I'm making fun of Eminem. I'm about to, and Eminem puts his hand on the dog's head. Says, yo, I already have my TV time, and but I just want to, and then Proof, he had a posse of two guys, Proof and Obi Trice, two rappers who were his buddies, and Proof sees that the Jew in his 40s has a script, a couple of pages of jokes, and I'm looking at it, and Proof just grabs the pages and throws them up in the air. And now everybody who watches this thinks like, oh, they're going to kill you. But Proof had a smile on his face. Like in my mind, I was in the middle of a WWE sketch.
Right.
That's how it felt to me.
Well, by the way, an indicator of that is the fact that Eminem puts his hand on the dog as if to silence the dog, as though Eminem didn't understand that the man with the puppet on his hand.
Well, he looked at me. When he said it, he looked at the Jew. He didn't look at the dog, but he put his hand on it.
But you never felt threatened.
Never felt remotely threatened, to the point where I was like, every time people asked me about it, like, were you scared, man? Were you scared? Man, these are rappers and people of color. Like, what are you talking about? And
but you wound up paying it off in a gorgeous way.
Well, so here's what happened. I wanted to pay it off on the live show. I wanted to come out with like a little neck brace and do the jokes that I wanted to do to Eminem and sneak them out that way. And I was going to go backstage and talk to Jimmy Fallon, who was the host and my friend. And I'm sure he would have been up for it. But I could not get backstage because the talent people were like, he's going to kill you. Oh, Mr. Grant, he's going to kill you. That's what they were like.
Right.
He's a rapper. Don't you know what rappers do? And I was just laughing. I thought, this is crazy. He's going to kill me over that? I don't think so. And backstage, like at the MTV, I'm going to get killed. There's a lot of people around.
So you do this press conference.
So so then we ended up doing...
Press conference.
Yes, we did a press conference that's how we ended up doing it. Yeah, went to a press conference and answered the questions that way.
And you did put the
neck brace. Yes. So and that ended up being part of the remote, and so we had a great piece of comedy for the show. Because until we had that, I thought, this isn't good. I mean, well, we had the red carpet also. So we had the red carpet, then we had the aborted Eminem sketch. And until we did the press con, because people afterwards were like congratulating me, man, that was great. I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't get out my jokes. I just wanted it to be funny. And they were just like, no, everybody's talking about it. And then the next day it was like on the front page of the Daily News or whatever. So the puppet got a lot of attention for it. But like in my mind, all I was thinking about was I didn't get to do the jokes. We had some really great jokes.
I love that you feel like the puppet got attention, but you didn't get to do your jokes.
I don't know. It's all the same.
That's the line of a comedy writer right there, in a nutshell.
It's all the same.
The puppet got attention, but you didn't get to do your jokes.
No, they weren't all my jokes. They were other comedy writers' jokes too. And No, it's all about, I meant the puppet didn't get to do his jokes, honestly. Like, that's what I wanted. It was always about just delivering the funniest remote to the Conan show. And
Is there a kind of method disconnect between you and Triumph?
I just think of myself as working for Triumph and Triumph being my meal ticket at the same time.
But I mean, when
Whatever
Triumph
that-
is
however
being
that works.
mean, when Triumph is
Oh,
like...
there's definitely a disconnect that works for Triumph for his victims. Like when Triumph's being mean, I don't think people are nearly as hurt by it as they would be if a human was saying it.
Is this something
As a
that...
white male.
Is this something that you
Especially.
discovered through doing Triumph, or like did you, or
No,
did
I
you
think
intellectualize it in advance?
I didn't bother to intellectualize it. It just felt it. It was just obviously there was, first of all, the original Triumph was completely, it was all irony because it was supposed to be a bad insult comic who only said for me to poop on. That was the original joke. So it started as an entirely ironic piece, but as that chipped away into real insults, there remained the cigar, the bow tie, the puppet, all this old-fashioned shtick and silliness that gives it a layer of separation and irony that I think has always made it more playful and less mean-spirited than it would be if it was a regular insult comic. And I don't think, I would never want to be like, I would never want to deliver those jokes as myself. It wouldn't be fun for me. It's always been fun because I'm doing it through this absurd character.
Right.
And you know, that's not all he does. He does insults, but there's this other stuff, that physical humor that goes with the puppet that, you know, adds different different style of comedy to it.
Well, just how many things and people has Triumph humped over the years?
Fewer and fewer as the years go by, but yes, it was always. We did a big sex thing at the Alec Baldwin remote recently, where at the Alec Baldwin roast, where I hadn't done one of those in years, where a dog was like, you know, simulating oral sex with Triumph. Triumph wore a strap on to calm down Alec Baldwin's terrified Maltese, and then the Maltese went for the hot dog, and everybody went home happy. I partly did it because at a roast, I don't really like doing roasts as Triumph because he's doing everything everybody else is doing all of a sudden. He's just a dog doing it, but it's still, everybody else has really good jokes too. But I like going up to people. That's what makes it fun for me, is
It's Triumph out in the world.
Triumph out in the world, Triumph actually saying things to people's face. You know, that's what makes it different to me. And the closer you put him next to other insult comics at a podium, then the less special it is. So.
All right, so we're going to get into some of the other applications of Triumph down the road.
Okay.
But now I'm going to just go back a little bit, because you talked about how Triumph ultimately became this thing that you would do for Conan after you'd left the show. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about what precipitated the decision for you to leave Conan, which you talk about as like the greatest job you ever had.
It's the greatest job I ever had because we were starting from scratch, and because we were creating something that was the first time I really got to have a playground where we were all just putting on whatever we thought was funny, and that it was actually working, a lot of it. And the honor of replacing Letterman's show was a big part of it too. You know, being part of that late night history and bonding with this group of writers that I didn't know any of them before we started. And we just all felt like we went through a war together, because, you know, it was such a challenge to mount a new show, to try to be original, to help Conan along as he was, you know, getting, you know, we all knew he was the funniest of any of us, you know, and yet he had to get there, you know, and that was a struggle for him to get comfortable, and then the network, and then the people on the staff who didn't want us to do high production material. It felt like a war, and it was exhausting, and I was a newlywed, and that was a big part of it. I just really, like the day I got married, everything changed in my head. Like I just felt like, because I'd been with this girl for a long time and through SNL, and
yeah, you and Michelle were together back to Chicago.
Yeah, I met her in Chicago before I got SNL. And then she had to live with me through SNL, and everything, I was so focused on my work. And then here I was focused on my work again. And it was like, at least we had the weekends now, but it was like an all year round job. And it was exhausting, and I would still come home on weeknights at like 11 because I was working so hard. And I just wanted to have a better life with her. Like from the moment we got married, it just felt different. Like, no, this is not what anybody deserves. I don't, and she doesn't. And so that was weighing on me by a year into this show. Mm-hmm. And then, and it was like incrementally we were figuring out how to make it work better for Conan. I think the show was way more successful. I felt like when I left the show, we had pretty much figured out what's working for Conan, what doesn't. We weren't interrupting interviews or having fake guests like, that would kind of throw off the normal mechanism of a talk show. And there are some, Conan's amazing, and there are some hosts who like would welcome that kind of chaos. Like not many, like Craig Ferguson actually, who gets a lot of shit from comedy writers who were always thought didn't find him interesting for some reason. I will say this about him. I don't think anyone's hosted a show who gave less of a shit on camera about how it was going, who seemed like he was just having a great time no matter what happened and inviting interruptions and nonsense all the time. That's kind of what I dreamed of when we started. And it just didn't work for Conan because he had no on-camera experience, and because it was just too many things to throw at him. Mm-hmm. So by the time we left, we realized that like the craziest stuff, let's just compartmentalize it. It always felt like cheating to me when I started, like to say, here's, I'm trying to think of an example. Well, satellite TV was a perfect example. There's a very popular sketch, and popular with the writers, because he'd be flicking through channels and we would be able to name a channel any non sequitur kind of joke we wanted to. But the fact that it was within, that it was identified as weird before the sketch even started, right, allowed you to make even weirder choices. So in a way, like, although it wasn't the, Ernie Kovacian kind of anarchic structure that I had initially wished for, it actually, the structure that it provided mm-hmm. allowed for even crazier satellite channels. Because once the audience knows their
so you put a frame around it, and then it doesn't bleed into anything else.
Yeah, it doesn't bleed into anything else, but it's also, you're identifying it. You're holding the audience's hand a little bit, right, and telling them this is going to be a weird bit because of this. Right. But
you sort of did that with Actual Items too.
No, because Actual Items was a trick. It was like, we didn't say, Actual Items was a parody of right. Jay Leno's headlines, but this was, we would like have random things. We would have like Conan's wacky neighbor interrupt sketches in the early years,
Oh, we haven't even talked about your great character as Conan's publicist.
Well, that's just Bernie Brillstein. That was Ira. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It was just, I got you this. Listen to this fucking thing. I don't even remember the bit anymore.
But were you doing Bernie?
Yeah, I was doing Bernie.
Okay.
Yeah, I was doing Bernie Brillstein. That's the one time I got to do Bernie on television. he would call in with different opportunities for Conan. Uh,
All right, so what did you do
Mm-hmm.
after you left the Conan show?
well, I left again in my work ethic, paranoid mind. I wouldn't leave unless I had a job. So Bob Odenkirk and I came up with an idea for a Da Bears movie. And we sold it to Paramount. And I told Conan, this is a good opportunity for me. I can be in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get it made, that'll help me too in writing more movies. And I love the characters.
And then, by the way, let's just put this in the context of this
Mm-hmm.
timeline. At this time, Lorne had had huge success with Wayne's World.
Yeah.
And so this idea of taking beloved SNL sketches and turning them into movies was now kind of a thing.
Was kind of a thing. And it was...
I mean, you said you'd written the Hans and Franz movie.
yeah, and that was just nixed by Arnold. Otherwise, it would have been made. But Arnold didn't want to make it
That's crazy.
at the end. He was like, well, because Last Action Hero bombed.
Right.
And that was sort of a meta kind of movie. And I was told that after that, Arnold was like, no, I can never play myself in a movie. Never, ever indicate that I am aware of my persona again in the movie. It can't happen or the world is going to blow up. It's never, don't push that button. Don't push the green light. Run from the green light. So that was why that movie didn't get made. And now the Bears movie,
Okay.
I don't know. We wrote a movie, we liked it, and then they hated it and didn't get made. Oh, and also Farley. Farley was, blowing up now. He had shot Tommy Boy. A couple of things happened. Farley had shot Tommy Boy. He was getting offers to do, bigger movies, and literally his managers were saying, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Are you going to be in an ensemble? You're going to be one of 3 or 4 guys? You're going to be the star, And so he was getting Cable Guy, and he turned down Kingpin. He turned down the chance to work with the Farrelly brothers to do Black Sheep. Mm-hmm. He wasn't getting the best advice. Tommy Boy was great, but, he
It's sort of his one great movie.
yeah. And then they just, he became the golden goose. We talked about it last time.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So the Superfans movie doesn't happen.
Superman's movie does not happen.
So let's get then to
I've read it at charity events, and it's a very funny movie. I read it with Mike Ditka and all that, but it didn't happen. And then the Dana Carvey show happened.
This is exactly where I wanted to go. So how does the Dana Carvey show come about? Because you obviously had worked with Dana at SNL. There was
Yeah.
even that conversation about Dana taking the slot that ultimately
Yes.
Conan occupied. So now here comes the next great opportunity to work with Dana Carvey.
Dana Carvey was trying to be a movie star as well as some of these other SNL guys, and his movies hadn't panned out too well so far.
Well, Wayne's World had done extremely
Wayne's World
well.
was great, but then they tried to make him kind of a leading man, and he did. I don't remember.
Opportunity Knocks.
Opportunity Knocks and Clean Slate. He had a couple.
Oh, and there was the one he did with Anthony Hopkins and
Oh well,
Matthew-
he was a supporting character,
Yeah.
and that was more like. But that's not movie star
Road
stuff.
to Wellville.
Road to Wellville, yes, and he also did a movie with. Was it Nicolas Cage
Oh yeah.
and Lovitz or something?
Something like that.
I don't know.
Where they were like bank robbers or
Yeah,
something.
something.
Yeah, I have a vague recollection.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he and Lovitz were also supposedly offered Bad Boys. Wasn't that the name of the movie that Martin Lawrence ended up doing?
And Will Smith?
Yeah.
That was supposed to be Dana Carvey and Lovitz?
I think there was a version with Bruckheimer. Anyway,
Wow.
I don't know. Anyway, didn't happen.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah. So Dana was.
I'd love to see that now.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Dana Carvey show.
With that de-aging makeup. Yeah.
Right, from The Irishman.
Yes.
The whole digital, yeah.
I just want to see Lovitz de-aged in a movie. Just spend a fortune of money. We've got to get the old John Lovitz back. So there's this opportunity. I mean, Dana had probably been, people probably banging on the door to get Dana to do a sketch show since the day he left SNL. And he finally decided to do it and got a lot of offers, pretty much anywhere we could have sold it. And they swung for the fences. They went to ABC. It was the #1 network at the time. They offered the #1 time slot in the entire, the best, Home Improvement was the #1 show. Mm-hmm. And they offered 9:30 after Home Improvement. And these guys behind Dana wanted to swing for the fences. And Dana, somebody who kind of I was bonded with in this way, like we didn't think big. Like Conan was a big thinker. Mm-hmm. But Dana was like, why don't we do HBO or CBS will make us a longer guarantee or whatever. He didn't want to necessarily do ABC, but all the momentum from his people was, go for it. It's you and Smigel, and you'll get great writers, and swing for the fences, man. And so swing we did.
All right, so let's compartmentalize this conversation into two pieces, which is putting together the writing staff and that cast, mm-hmm. and then the material that you all created for the show that would follow Home Improvement. Mm. So talk about, first of all, your writing staff.
So for the Dana Carvey show writing staff, by now I had become so tight with some of the Conan writers that we'd hired that had already left the Conan show, even before me, like Louis and Dino. They left the Conan show before I did, and that actually kind of greased the skids for me a little bit, because they were the two guys I leaned on the most at that show. Mm-hmm. And they also, it just sort of opened up in my head, well, maybe I should get out too. Maybe this is too much of a burnout kind of deal.
I guess I didn't realize they preceded you out the door.
They did.
Okay.
Both of
them.
Wow. I actually wanted Louis to replace me. He had left, and then I left, and then I tried to talk him into being head writer and coming back, and he just didn't want to do it because he had just too many other things he wanted to do. He was like wanted to be a stand-up and famous.
But you also had some remarkable people on
Charlie Kaufman.
Charlie Kaufman, of all people. Talk about,
Well, you don't think of Charlie as a sketch writer, but that's what he had already worked as a sketch writer on a show for Fox that Jennifer Aniston was in, that I do not remember the name of now.
Oh,
The
yes.
Something. It was a filmed sketch show.
Yes, it was kind of around the same time as In Living Color.
Yeah.
And I think Overton was on it.
I don't remember.
Yes.
But it was in the mid-90s. And Charlie was just somebody who'd submitted material. A lot of his material was strange in a good way. Some of it was felt just okay. And then there was one sketch that I remember thinking was 1,000% brilliant. It was a parody of Unsolved Mysteries. Parody makes it sound less than it is, but it went into this crazy place, and that was enough for me to want to hire him. And he was LA based, married, and somewhat reluctant and hesitant about doing it. So, all we could tell him was we were going to try to make a crazy show, and so we came. And then we got John Glazer was somebody that I hired mostly because I'd seen the SNL people. Like we kind of had I was very conscious about, I didn't want to, there are two things I didn't want to do. I didn't want to hire anybody who worked for Conan. currently. Didn't want to poach anybody's writing staff. And also SNL was in a great deal of disarray at the time. 95, 96 season was the one where they overhauled the cast after the New York Magazine article.
And they jettisoned, famously, Sandler
and
Rock.
Well, Rock had already left for In Living Color, although he now says that he was fired too. I don't know. And Farley also. They basically, and Jim Downey, they basically started over. And I wanted them to get the first crack at cast members because they just needed to restock entirely. But they, in return, let me look at their leftovers. I got to look at all the auditions, for
Is that where you
year.
saw Glazer?
Yes. Oh, wow. And oddly enough, did not see Steve Carell. They never auditioned him. They auditioned his wife, Nancy Walls, who was great. But I just what level of slap in the face is going on here where Steve Carell can't even make the final auditions? When he walked into our room, our audition room, this is a guy I'd heard of, frankly, if anything, he had a lot to live up to in terms of our expectations, but he
Because the hype on him was
yes,
so
there was
great.
all this hype. I'd heard about him for years. And then he comes in and he was the funniest audition. And the easiest hire, that was like Farley at SNL. Just the easiest hire imaginable.
Well, Farley, the thing that's so great about Carell, and I think about, there's two pieces from the Carvey show that I remembered Carell from immediately was Germans who say nice things.
Yeah, that was his idea.
Was it?
Yes.
Brilliant. And his commitment in that,
Yeah.
Is fierce. But then also the idiot pranksters.
That was Louis, and it was, And it's funny because they're both energy pieces, and Carell was so young and intense, and he would tell me, I try to keep up with the guy, but it's impossible. It's just, because Carvey's energy isn't quite that. He doesn't do the manic thing so much.
The only other person I've ever seen who can sort of match that level of, intensity was, Forte.
Will Forte, yeah, when he would play
Farley too, for sure.
Yeah,
but
Will Forte when he would play Zell Miller on SNL, and he would literally work himself up so that until he got a really frightening kind of vein popping out of his forehead.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's how I felt watching Carell do those pieces. On Carvey.
Yeah. He's just cranking it to 11 to 12, and. Carvey's I know I'm not even going to try to compete. I can't. I'm just going to do my version. And
talk about what those two pieces were, though, for anyone who's not seen them.
Well, Germans Who Say Nice Things was pretty self-explanatory. Not really, I suppose, because they scream Hitler Youth, crazy.
But what are they screaming?
This was a very lovely party. I hope to come again soon. Right? It was that kind of thing.
That kind of thing, yeah.
What's that movie that Richard Dreyfuss was in at the time? Mr. Holland's Opus was the feel-good movie of the year! It was that kind of thing. But with Carell's crazy, the feel-good movie!
So good.
Yeah.
And then the idiot pranksters thing never ceased to just fracture me.
Right. Well, Louis C.K. is he's an incredible writer. He's amazing at coming up with ideas that are sort of counterintuitive kind of stuff. And so that idea of just guys who their idea of a prank is paying for gas and then driving away before the guy puts the...
But they've already given the money.
Yes, they've already given the money or the credit card, whatever, and then they drive away and, we got him! It's just, there's things that separate writers. I always said this about Jack Handey, a lot of my ideas, a lot of everybody's ideas are like, I'm very proud of them, but I'd say a lot of them somebody could have come up with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Reagan as a mastermind, whatever kind of, those kind of ideas. There are others I think are more personal to me that I'm proud of that way. But like everything Jack Handey wrote, you just hear it and laugh and just think, I just never would have thought of that, you know.
Right.
He's really, he was one of a kind. And then Louis, some of these ideas are, some of his would be like that too. And Stupid Pranksters was one of them. Just not an idea many comedy writers would come up with.
Totally.
Yeah.
So wait, so now you had Carell on the show,
Mm-hmm.
but you also had this gentleman that you mentioned earlier who had been his understudy at Second City.
Yes.
So talk about how you wound up with the two Steves as they came to be known.
It's funny because like they tell the story like we saw each other in the audition and we're like, fuck, you know, I'm not going to get it because he's going to get it. And apparently that happened a lot in Chicago. They'd be up for stuff but that's...
Carell and Colbert would be
I
up for
think
the same
so,
stuff.
because they're probably like two of the funniest people in Chicago and they'd be up for commercials and things like that. But this was different. This was a sketch show ensemble. And in their minds, maybe because they were pitted against each other for jobs in Chicago, they saw themselves as similar. Mm-hmm. And we didn't see them as similar at all. You know, Carell is big and goofy and is like sort of has a handsome face but a silly face at the same time, like Steve Martin. And Colbert is this completely other thing, this just, you know, intellectual deadpan guy,
right,
is how we saw him. So authority figure. I didn't see Carell as a credible authority figure at all.
Because he was too silly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It'd be a waste of him to make him the dad or something, you know, in my mind. So yeah, we didn't have a problem using both of them at all. I mean, at one point we thought about, should we ask Bob Odenkirk instead of Colbert, because we know him and we know how funny he is. He was coming off Mr. Show. And then we were just like, no, let's just put our foot on the gas and go with the new people. And
now, did Colbert and Carell have that piece that they did on the show, the waiters who were disgusted by food?
you know, it's very confusing to me. Like, Carell auditioned with a piece called, that was called Podiatrist Who is Disgusted by Feet. He auditioned with it, hilarious. Then about halfway into production, they submitted waiters who were nauseated by food, which was, Colbert wrote it technically, but I just assumed it was spun off of Carell's idea. And Colbert was like, no, I thought of this on my own separately. And it just seemed weird, like maybe Carell had heard Steven's idea first, or...
So talk about what the
no
bit
idea.
is, because it's to me it's almost indescribable, but I'm sure you could describe it.
Well, it was something that, you know, they had these premises and I decided that it would be really funny to just identify them, like Monty Python kind of style, where we just put up a title card and just say the premise, because if the premise is, it's almost like compartmentalizing a weird idea on Conan. Like if the premise is so strange, it's almost funnier to identify it and then just watch it be played out, like skinheads from Maine. You know, rather than wasting time discovering it, just say the premise so that people can just relax and then just discover the laughs. Whereas Stupid Pranksters would not have worked that way, I don't think. Right. Because it's such a surprise, that twist, when they drive away. You kind of would ruin
Yeah, Skinheads from Maine is exactly what the title would suggest.
Yes, yeah. There's no surprise there. It's just, and even waiters who are nauseated by food, it just helps to know exactly the premise to understand why they're behaving that way. And so it's basically a POV shot of the person giving the order, talking to Colbert and Carell, who were the two waiters, and Colbert is telling you the specials, and having a hard time getting them out because he's nauseated by them. And Carell is just making faces the whole time. I can't do it. There's only one Carell. But that was the whole premise, and we loved it. And it was the reason Stephen got hired, I think, by The Daily Show.
From what I understand, both of them got hired
because of that sketch.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen got hired first, and then he recommended Carell. And then when he told Madeline Smithberg, I believe, he was the other guy in that sketch. She was like, oh, yeah, let's get him. So, yeah, that was a beautiful showcase for those guys.
So now talk about some of the other stuff that Dana did before we talk about how the show launched, which obviously is...
What Dana did on the show?
Yeah, because it's really interesting. Dana obviously had, from SNL, so many signature characters,
right,
impressions, and my understanding was that he was kind of reluctant to sort of trade on doing the church lady or George
He was
Bush.
reluctant, but I was also very reluctant.
Why?
To do that. Because I had seen like Dave Thomas do a sketch show. You know, Dave Thomas was this genius, one of my favorite people on maybe my favorite performer on SCTV. And he got to do some kind of a sketch show at some point. And he just like came right out with Bob Hope. And I was like, this is never going to be as much fun as when you did it on SCTV. Mm-hmm. And it feels like you're sending a message to the audience that you're just going to see, this is what I got. This is my bag of tricks. So to me,
but isn't there a certain amount, like
comfort level?
Yeah,
certainly.
If you're
that's the executive talking right now.
If you're Paul McCartney, you want to hear "Hey Jude" if you're coming to see Paul McCartney.
Well, if Paul McCartney, remember Paul McCartney's like 90 now. What if Paul McCartney was 40? Right. What if Paul McCartney was 35, and he was about to write? Band on the Run, not my favorite song, but a lot of people loved it. Maybe
it's a great album.
Maybe you'd be happy to hear Band on the Run.
And
so I wanted Dana.
During the Wings era, McCartney wasn't playing a lot of Beatles songs.
No, he wasn't, but he was putting. He had a lot of hits. I mean, you know, they weren't. Some of them were amazing. Now we're really getting into. I like Calico Sky, actually. You know, it's from the '90s. It's an anti-war piece, but it's a love song at the same time. I don't think so. I think it was a later album, and I'm just waiting for everybody to click away to the Constipated Cat video, if they haven't hours ago. Okay.
Well, by the way,
my point is,
we could talk about Carvey doing Paul McCartney.
Well, that's what happened. Well, see, that was a new trick. He had barely done Paul McCartney ever before. That was on the very first Dana Carvey show.
Right.
He did an amazing Paul McCartney. We parodied something fresh. The Beatles Memories, the Beatles anthology had just come out.
On ABC.
On ABC. Yeah. It was a perfect sketch to do. And he came out, he did an amazing Paul McCartney. He did a very funny Steve Forbes impression. He did President Clinton. I think he did a very funny President Clinton, even though we sabotaged the sketch with all those nipples.
But we'll get to that because that's kind of important in this narrative.
My point was he had a lot more he could do. Charles Grodin had a show.
Yes.
And he did a fantastic Charles Grodin
Unbelievable.
impression. Yeah. So I was like, don't tell the people you're going to just do the old stuff. You got a million more things in you.
Had he ever done Ted Koppel before?
He had done Ted Koppel.
He had done Ted Koppel. The Koppel piece is one of my favorites.
I don't even remember what it is.
Wasn't that the frame around which led into the Clinton Dole bit? Wasn't that
Clinton
Koppel
Dole bit? Oh yeah, we probably used Koppel a few times that show. Yes, he would do Koppel, but he would never make it all. That wasn't the only thing he would do in that sketch. It was always like he's doing Strom Thurmond, or he's doing, like I said, Steve Forbes or President Clinton. He had a lot. He did a lot of new stuff. He did very little.
No, he did do the church lady, as I recall, once.
We did the church lady on the first show as a as a whole joke about NBC intellectual property. I played an ABC executive and basically giving a fuck you to NBC lawyers by saying, well, we're Disney, we have high-powered lawyers, and we've arranged not only to use the church lady, but also Larry Bud Melman.
Right.
And then we got the real Larry Bud Melman to
this
say,
was all about,
suck it, NBC!
Because NBC had not let Letterman
use intellectual property on CBS.
Right.
Yes.
So that was sort of what that was
yes,
about.
it was a very showbiz bit at the end of the thing. And the reason we did it was because he had done a hilarious top 10 bit on Letterman that you can't even look at now because Princess Di, her life ended so tragically. But there was like this stretch in 1996 when people were making slut jokes about Princess Di because she had had an affair, and there was slut shaming was acceptable back then, and Princess Di jokes about it.
Because she was still alive.
She was still alive, yeah. Pretty much, it always helps when the person's alive. But it was coming from the church lady so it wasn't like a man slut shaming Princess Di. It was a character who's completely obsessed with, propriety
right.
doing it. So it was acceptable in that context. But it's like I couldn't even look at it now. Right. We did a couple of Prince Charles, Princess Di things, and those are like the things that I just wouldn't even want to look at now because it's just too sad. All
right, so let's go to the opening show and that infamous Clinton piece and talk about what it was and kind of how it sort of reverberated through the show itself.
So Louis C.K. had this idea where the cold open of the show was a collaborative piece. I don't remember. I think Dana had the initial idea, which was Clinton just addressing the country and talking about his potential opponents and trying to be respectful, all the Republican candidates who were running against him, but suppressing laughter because he just knew how easy it was going to be to beat any one of them. Oh, I'm sorry. Bob Dole has a lot of experience. I'm sorry. That kind of thing. And then Louis had a different idea that we tacked on, which was commenting on Hillary was also incredibly unpopular at this time. Mm-hmm. So it was at the height of the Whitewater stuff.
Right.
And
yeah, I remember you guys did some like surveillance video.
Yes, because she was considered a liability, his only liability at the time. This is pre-Monica. And so he was something where he asserted that he was assuring the country that Hillary has been locked away in
like a safe room or something.
In a safe room, exactly. And here, let's cut away, and it was Heather Morgan as Hillary just making rabid, desperate faces to get out. And got a big laugh, and in her stead, I've shown that I'm the pain-feeling president, the nurturing president. So, to further demonstrate my commitment to being the nurturing president, I have developed the ability to breastfeed. I will be a father and a mother to this country. And then he opened his shirt and started breastfeeding a baby, like a doll. And that was probably maybe enough. Maybe already too much, but certainly enough of too much. But no, that was Louis' idea. And then Robert, the animal-obsessed member of the writing staff, was like, what if he has multiple nipples? Like he has 8 nipples, and then we bring out live cats and live puppies and kittens, and it's just, I can't stop laughing.
And this is the cold open of the first show.
This is following Home Improvement, which I had never watched because I just was a bad producer. So instead of producing, I didn't realize that part of producing was watching the lead-in. I just assumed Home Improvement was like Tim Allen. I thought, oh, well, that guy, didn't he deal coke, right? He's been in jail, and then Pamela Anderson's on the show. So I didn't think of it as a...
Wow, when you deconstruct it that way, I
Yeah.
now understand your thinking.
Yeah, it's like cocaine and Tommy Lee's sex tape at 9 o'clock. I mean, but no. I watched like 5 shows in, after we'd had the shit kicked out of us. I finally let me watch this home improvement thing. And my jaw just dropped, and I was like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. This is a show that children watch with their parents. And that's why it's an enormous hit. At 9 o'clock at night, it should be an 8 o'clock show. Nobody told me. But parents watch this with their kids. This is a show that everybody can watch, and that's why it's the most popular show on television. And our show is just a cruel prank on the audience. And I had no idea. And this is like 5 shows in.
No one tried to talk you out of the Bill Clinton breastfeeding babies and cats and dogs.
One person, David Weston, is a high-ranking executive. I think he was, cut his teeth in the news department. But all the other people were like, we like it. David doesn't. I don't know if they were being disingenuous, or maybe it was true. But David Weston's upset about it. So, we were like, okay, we're not going to have tight close-ups. That was our compromise. See what I did for you? Did you see what I did for you? No tight close-ups of the nipples. You're killing me here. That's what I went along with. I don't know what happened. That's the one guy, and Taco Bell was fine with it.
No, that's the other thing I wanted to talk about, because one of the other things
Yes.
that was remarkable about this show is, look, it was so the bones of it were very like old school 50s TV comedy variety show.
Yeah.
Kind of like the likes of which hadn't been on in primetime for years, and it was presented by a single sponsor.
It wasn't really, but it was.
But that was
But it was. They paid money for their product placement and name attachment to the brand identification.
Now,
that was Dana's idea.
Now, was Taco Bell intended to be the sponsor for the whole thing, or just that episode?
It was always going to be one episode, different sponsor every week. We thought that was the joke, and
how many weeks out had it been pre-sold to different sponsors?
we had a bunch of people lined up by then. But by the first show, it's going to be Taco Bell, then it's going to be Pepsi, then it's going to be Mountain Dew, then it's going to be Mug Root Beer.
Right.
A lot of them were the same Pepsi
company.
brand.
Right.
They owned Mug Root Beer. They owned Mountain Dew.
And then you had these sort of old style, like almost Gleason show production numbers that you did, where
we had an orchestral theme song. Da 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 dee doo, that kind of crap, and that we got a real orchestra to do. It was beautiful, and and we parodied like there was one like a series of photos of Dana, and we were trying to parody like that kind of adorable but egocentric kind of celebrity thing where you see the celebrity as a little boy, and then you see him as a teenager, and then you see him older, until it got to Dana, and then we got to a photo of Dana like 10 years older, then a Dana age 60, then 80, then finally, Dana Carvey with like a RIP and a death year, which is probably like last year by now, 2016, and then his show was good or something like that. And that's how the opening montage ended, with a tombstone.
All right, so talk about how the premiere was received after the...
Yeah, so after that debacle, it got big laughs, but thousands of complaints. Mm-hmm. And then Taco Bell, of course, tries to make a big show of distancing themselves. We were appalled. We're never going to sponsor them again. So we were already cursed. People thought, okay, so they have, it's Pepsi this week because Taco Bell pulled out, you know.
So you're able to spin it a certain way.
We didn't want to spin it that way. That's how people looked at it.
I see.
Like, oh, this show's a disaster. Their sponsor already pulled out because they were so inappropriate.
Right.
The one person who spoke up for the show was George Schlatter, the Laugh-In producer. It was kind of amazing. He said, that was the most fantastic beginning of a show. That's what the country needs, is that kind of comedy. Gutsy, nipple-sucking comedy.
But George Schlatter had famously had another sketch show that I believe didn't last even one full episode. I believe it was canceled.
Turn On.
Turn On was canceled in the middle of its premiere.
Canceled in the middle of its premiere. And
so we have to put some context around the great George Schlatter, who I love.
Yeah. Me too.
Okay, so what do you feel like you learned from the experience of doing the Carvey show?
One thing I learned was if a network tells you, we haven't done this before, you know, this kind of comedy and late night kind of edgy stuff, but this is exactly what we want to be doing. Run for the hills if somebody tells you that, because they just don't know what they're going to get.
Right.
Basically, they did want to like make their network a little hipper. They were like the Grace Under Fire kind of shows is what they were featuring back then. And, you know, in their mind, they wanted to go for more sophisticated, yuppie-friendly shows. Sort of when, like, you know, CBS decided that Green Acres was shit, even though it was one of the funniest shows ever on TV, and replaced it with, you know, Mary Tyler Moore and Bob Newhart, which, hey, my favorite shows ever, practically. But the point being, they're both great.
Right.
You know, it's all about quality. You know, people mistake.
Did you try and adjust, though, in any way once you sort of saw Home Improvement? And
you know, there was this famously, Hulu did this whole documentary about this show.
Yes.
And I'm very grateful because he picked the best sketches. He makes the show look amazing.
The show was amazing.
Well,
though.
the best parts were.
I will tell you, because I have seen all of the episodes, including the unaired episode, which has the Gerald Ford piece, which is, to me, one of the greatest sketches I think either you or Carvey ever did.
It's one of the funniest things I've ever been involved in, and that was a gift. That was
unaired, right?
It was unaired, but then I did it with Carvey on SNL.
Right.
So it became one of the greatest SNL sketches that Carvey ever did. And it was
Talk about what that bit was.
Okay,
so brilliant.
Me and Colbert are in the edit room editing a piece of his, I believe. It may never have even made it, the show. I'm not even sure, but it probably did. But the thing with Isaac Hayes, maybe? I don't remember. I feel like Stephen did a news report. Man, you know what? It never made air. It's in the DVD extras.
Okay.
Anyway, we're in there editing this one piece, and it's in an edit room at CBS Studios. And all of a sudden on these monitors, the house feed is playing, and it's Dan Rather announcing that Reagan is dead. This is 1996. Reagan did not die. And he's announcing it, and we're like, holy shit. But then he does it again. And we realize that Dan Rather is doing this so that if it happens like over the summer when Dan Rather's in Nantucket, he still gets to be the one who tells America that Reagan is dead. I swear to God.
I did not know that this was the origin of this sketch.
Yes, it was a gift. The sketch was a gift. And then I immediately said, let's do this and just have the scenarios be more and more absurd. And then Colbert immediately started coming up with funny ones. And then we told the idea to Louis very quickly. And then Louis added some of the funniest things like, and I'm gay, or he was delicious. Both of those lines are Louis's. And yeah, it's absolutely maybe the funniest SNL sketch I've ever been involved in.
And there's something so gorgeous in Carvey's impression, and this is when you talk about the music of Carvey's impressions. Every time he says the name
Gerald Ford.
Gerald Ford.
Exactly. He does it just silly enough that it's got variation every time, and you know he's playing a game, but his face never tells you that he's anything but Tom Brokaw trying his best. It was an unbelievably funny
It gets funnier
choice.
every time he says it.
Gerald Ford. Yeah, I know. And I made myself be the guy in the room because I just had the most boring voice. I really wanted it to feel like a real guy. And I knew I could do that better than anybody, and not try to be funny. So even at SNL, I was like, I want to play the voice of the guy. And you know what? At SNL, we had to fight to get it on the air.
Why?
Well, this is an interesting thing. So when I left SNL, and they brought in this whole new group, there was definitely there was some threat. There was a feeling of like, we're our group and you're that group.
They wanted to sever ties with the past?
Not sever, but I think they didn't like the idea of the old guard coming in, the Downey people and that era, and they felt a little insecure about, how much the writing had been praised for years under Downey, and then their show was more performance-oriented, a lot of recurring characters, and then occasionally I would write a sketch, even when I was doing cartoons, and I would have a lot of trouble getting sketches on when I was the cartoon guy. Yeah. And like at one point, Tim Meadows actually says to me, Robert, I'm telling you, they freeze up when they see your name on the sketch. And then Jimmy Fallon, a whole other week, said to me, hey man, just put my name on the sketch instead of yours. Because I'm telling you, it's a great sketch, and it's not going to get on. They're just not going to put it on.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and I did have a lot of trouble getting sketches on. I didn't write that many, and some of them were not as good because I'd always write by myself, and not that I'm a shitty writer, and that you've wasted 6 hours, but I mean I like the sketches I wrote. Some of them might have been better if I had been in the room collaborating with people, and also might have had a better chance of of getting picked if there were more people invested in them, instead of me just faxing them from my house.
Right.
But anyway, there were some that would kill and would still.
Well, maybe it's also that you lost some of the advocacy that you enjoyed when you were there initially, where there were people who were deeply invested in you and sort of.
Well, yeah, people who knew that I had a track record or whatever. But it's not like people didn't there. They knew who I was.
But perhaps they were advocating more for sort of their contemporaries.
Of course, that's just, it was very political. That's what people would tell me. I would have a little bit of a inkling in my head that, because everybody always gets paranoid at that show. But literally 2 different times people told me the room freezes up when they see your name on a piece. Like they want their own shit on.
Okay, so
this sketch, we do it at read through for
the Gerald
Carvey,
Ford piece.
The Gerald Ford piece, and it gets nothing, almost nothing. And I was like, Dana, we have to get this sketch on.
Now Dana's hosting, right?
Yeah, Dana was hosting.
Right.
He came back to host in 1996 after this show got canceled. And I was already I'd figured out the ambiguously gay duo, I'm going to do cartoons.
Which we have to get to.
Dear Lord. So Carvey and I just said, no, we really should do this piece. We have videotape evidence of this piece destroying, and we actually had to play it for them. We dug up the tape of the 8th show.
Wow.
And then it got on the air. And then after the piece got on the air and murdered, the same people are saying to me, that was just the structure, the way it ramped up. It was like a master class. It was incredible. I'm like, okay, thanks. I mean, it just was a very strange strange ride.
It's just interesting that you and Carvey coming in with, you would think, as as much credibility as you would be bringing back to the show, had to fight that hard to get that piece on.
It was a weird time. I think nowadays people are much more relaxed at the show that way. When old people come back, and it's like they're deferential, and and we were kind of when we were there, but this was just a weird time because Downey represented one thing, and then there was this new guard, and that had never really happened before on the show, where Lorne had remained, but there was the old producer who was still working there as a Weekend Update guy, and kind of like the conscience of the show in a way that, and then this whole new group of writers who were working under different people, and
All right,
so
so
it was-
before we get
anyway.
to the cartoons, which will connect the Dana Carvey show to your return to SNL,
Yeah.
do we want to take a little break?